精神科医は精神病の早期発見テストは誰にとっても有益だと主張しています。本当にそうでしょうか。またその危険性は何でしょうか。2003年、精神保健に関する新自由委員会という大統領諮問委員会が総合計画を発行しました。それにはアメリカ社会の主要な階層を対象に精神病の早期発見テストを実施する戦略が示されていました。その目標はこのようなものでした。精神病の早期発見をすること、精神障害を診断治療する上での学校の役割を拡大すること、精神科の枠を超えて一般内科医に精神病の早期発見テストを導入させることです。
It's going to screen the population for mental health. The whole population. They're going to do it by stages, starting with school children, of course.
今のところ強制的な精神病の早期発見テストはまだ実現していません。ある社会の階層を除いて、その階層とは最も弱い立場にあり、権利を持たない人々、つまり里子たちです。
A child goes into foster care. They label the child with some kind of a psychological problem. The child is immediately sent to therapy. Well, the therapist will say, well, I believe the child needs to be on something. So they recommend that the child see a psychiatrist to have the drug administered.
Out of the 60, 65 families that I see, easily 90% of the kids they have the mental health diagnosis to begin with. If they get it from a psychiatrist, it almost always comes with meds. And I think that we see identified as at-risk kids in the community, and we see some of the most intense situations, and a lot of them are on 4 or 5 different meds.
I've seen children that when the day they're taken out of their parents' custody and placed into state custody actually seem happy, healthy, vibrant, energetic. And then, 2 months later, after they've begun taking these medications, they are very slow. They are zombie-like, is the best way to describe it.
現在、テキサス州の児童養護制度で養育される子どもは必ず精神病の早期発見テストを受けます。その結果、里子の 60% が精神障害と診断され、向精神薬を服用させられています。中には3歳の幼児までいます。他の州はさらにひどいものです。例えばマサチューセッツ州では州の保護を受けている子どもの3分の2が精神病とされ治療を受けているのです。アメリカ全体で見ても里子は一般家庭の子どもの3倍以上の割合で薬物を投与されています。例えばガブリエル・マイヤーズという7歳の里子には2種類の強力な向精神薬が投与されていました。一つは子どもに自殺衝動を引き起こすという警告が FDA から出されているものでした。彼はシャワーのホースで首を吊りました。もう一つのマーケティング対象は現役の兵士です。彼らは定期的に軍の診療所で早期発見テストを受け、精神障害とレッテルを貼られ、暴力を誘発する危険性のある強力な薬物を投与されています。
Iraq wasn't like Vietnam. There weren't illegal drugs everywhere. But there were drugs everywhere because, every guy on post, they knew all they needed to do was go down and see the combat stress unit, the shrink, and he was the drug dealer on post for us.
Almost everybody that saw the body or experienced the event were put on some sort of psychotropic medication.
Some bases where my friends were at, my fellow veterans were at, that everyone, the whole platoon was on drugs.
I would say about 75% of active duty military is addicted to some type of psychotropic drug.
You could walk around a military barracks and you ask someone for some Prozac, and somebody's got some Prozac or some Xanax or some Zoloft.
I've got friends who were in the Army with me who are now dependent on Zoloft and psychotropic drugs just because they got used to it in Iraq and they didn't ever want to get off it, and now they're dependent on it and addicted to it.
We have huge numbers of military people on antidepressants, and instead of the suicide rate going down, which you'd expect if the drugs were effective, the suicide rate is going up.
This last January, we had more soldiers commit suicide than we had die in combat. And what's not being brought out much yet is the fact that the large majority of these soldiers were on these drugs. We're drugging the military at a rate we've never, ever seen before.
それでもまだ序の口です。軍の精神病早期発見テストは合衆国とドイツ、イタリアの合計15の基地にある43のクリニックで実施が計画されています。調査によると、イラクにいた軍人の 12%、アフガニスタンにいた軍人の 17% が何らかの抗うつ薬か睡眠薬を服用していたことが明らかになっています。その数は合計で2万人です。しかし、薬物投与される可能性のある妊婦や出産後の女性の数はその比ではありません。これらの女性に精神病のテストを義務付ける法律が実現したらそうなります。
When a woman is pregnant, right during the pregnancy, specifically right afterwards, her hormones are changing and sometimes raging. And to screen them and call it mental illness if they have any type of emotional issues in any way, shape, or form is utterly ludicrous.
法律で義務付けられていなくても、妊婦は精神病の早期発見テストを受けるかもしれません。しかも気づかぬうちに。病院から出てきた女性たちにインタビューしてみました。
Have you ever been screened for mental illness?
I have not been screened for mental illness.
No, I've never been screened for any mental illness.
I don't remember any pre-screening.
I have not been.
No.
No. Have you ever been screened for any mental illness?
No, I have not been screened for any mental illness.
Did your OB/GYN or gynecologist have you fill out a questionnaire that contains psychological questions?
Yes, my OB/GYN did give me a questionnaire that has psychological questions.
I've never been screened for mental illness. Yes, I would say the first time I went to see my OB/GYN, I did fill out questionnaires about even family medical history, my medical history, my mental state.
I've not been screened for any mental illness or depression. I took a questionnaire at my 6-week checkup, and it basically asked me about if I was crying, if I felt depressed.
Yeah, it was a questionnaire about depression. If you're depressed, or if you had any history of depression.
Are you happy with your normal day? Are you happy about being pregnant?
Have you ever hurt yourself? Are you happy? If I feel like hurting someone, if I was angry.
Do mental illness run in your family?
You know, it was very noticeable to me after the pregnancy that they're actually fishing for the postpartum depression.
When I was pregnant with my daughter, before I had her, I had to take postpartum depression medicine from my 7th month on to my 9th month.
こうした早期発見テストの行き着く先はどこでしょう。例えばあまり知られていませんが、1995年にテキサス州で立案された薬物漬け作戦があります。テキサス州薬物治療手順プロジェクト、略称 TMAP です。
TMAP is a program that was originated starting in the 90s, a collaborative group of doctors from University of Texas and the Texas Department of Mental Health and Mental Retardation. And what it was supposed to do was come up with the best practice for treating mental illness.
精神科医が多数を占めるこの委員会は、11の製薬会社から得た調査資金を使って段階的なフォローチャートを作成しました。それは精神的な問題を抱える患者に対し、最新で最も高価な精神薬のみを処方することを要求するものでした。もし一つの抗精神薬が効かなければ、医師は別の高価な薬を試みる義務があります。何も効かなかったら次の段階は電気ショック療法になるのです。しかし TMAP の立候責任者たちは重大な癒着関係を隠していました。
They didn't disclose that the researchers that were all involved in creating this, almost every single one of them had financial relationships with the pharmaceutical companies.
ですが癒着の問題を抱えているのはテキサス州だけではありません。アレン・ジョーンズはペンシルベニア州監察総監室の調査員でした。
I learned that these monies were all coming in to the state to support and to promote a program called TMAP, the Texas Medication Algorithm Project. And so my concern was piqued very quickly that there was at least one state official who might be inappropriately receiving and dispersing monies from drug companies. They called it PenMap, but it was based entirely on the TMAP model. Also very quickly, I learned that there were other state employees who were serving on advisory boards financed through various pharmaceutical companies, and other state employees who were accepting honorariums personally, directly, from drug companies for speaking in their state capacities or official capacities. That's a felony in Pennsylvania. I saw there was a much bigger picture and attempted to surface that bigger picture and was consistently told to back off. I was told that drug companies write checks to politicians on both sides of the aisle. Back off. you will not expand this investigation into the drug companies. Continue to press the investigation, much of it on my own time at this point. I became increasingly alarmed that all of the drugs recommended by the TMAP program were exclusively the new patented atypical antipsychotics for schizophrenia and all of the brand new patented SSRI antidepressants. None of it added up. When it became obvious to me that my investigation was not going to be permitted to continue, and it became obvious to the Inspector General's office that I was not going to stop the case, they threatened me with loss of career, with loss of job, with loss of reputation, essentially.
調査の結果、ペンシルベニア州の薬剤部長が有罪になりましたが、TMAP とPENMAPのような類似の事業はアメリカ中に広がり、何十億ドルもの薬の売り上げをもたらしたのです。しかし、精神医療が得た巨額のあぶく銭は公費から支払われたのです。2001年、TMAP とその子供版である CMAP により、テキサス州の医療扶助制度、精神保健制度、刑務所制度は破産状態になりました。では、これは最終的にどうなるのでしょう。政府運営の、つまり税金で賄われる精神病早期発見計画により、精神科医によって精神病であると判断された全ての人に強力かつ危険で、しかも高価な向精神薬が投与され、それが効かない場合には電気ショックを施されるのです。
They're going to start with school children on the New Freedom Initiative. Then they're going to move it to senior citizen nursing homes. Then they're going to move it to, of course, military. And then parents.
By the time you're 18, you've been screened in utero when you were an infant. You were screened as an infant when you first came out. You were screened in your daycare. You were screened then at school. You were screened at the pediatrician's office. You're screened in high school. You're screened over and over again.
And to sit there and pass laws requiring that people be screened and drugged based on screening under state law or federal law is really, it's criminal. It should not be done.
They're marketing this madness all over this country, and we are actually becoming an example for the rest of the world. So we're, again, the poster child, if you will, and so the rest of the world's spending more and more on drugs.
I don't know that there was ever a time in the history of the world where people have been drugged to the extent of what we're seeing today.
The reality is, if you look at the overall picture, I don't see these drugs helping us make a better society. We see it in the military, we see it in our children, we see it in the schools. These drugs are not working to make a better society.
では、この偽装された精神病マーケティング作戦が全面展開されれば、一旦精神病と診断され、向精神薬の投与システムに放り込まれた患者はどうなってしまうのでしょうか。